Hey there, hi there, hello there. This is Les Bowen, and we're with you again for the fourth episode of Bowen on the Birds, which is, as you might have noticed, a podcast about the Philadelphia Eagles and some other stuff here and there. If we get tired of talking about the Eagles or we run out of Eagle stuff to say, a lot of stuff going on today. The Eagles have wrapped up their spring work. They will be back. Um, in late July for training camp, and really from early June until late July is the official dead period of the NFL offseason. The offseason, of course, stretches from mid-February until late July, but as we all know, a lot of stuff happens during most of that time. There's the combine, there's the draft, there's free agency, there's OTAs. It's a busy off season, but the unbusy part starts now. Guys are going to go on vacation. Executives will go on vacation. There won't be a whole lot happening officially. In fact, that was part of Nick Sirianni's message to his team today when asked what he told them to head back before they come back in late July. He told them two things. One was to show up in the best shape of their careers when they arrive for training camp. The other thing is stay out of the news. That's the only way you're going to hear much about the Eagles between now and late July that isn't just, lists of stuff and so on, is if somebody does something that makes you hear about him, and not in a good way, usually. So you don't want that. I'm not talking about, charity softball tournaments and golf tournaments and those sorts of things. I'm talking about the bad kind of news. And it reminds me of several years ago when Chip Kelly gave exactly that sort of invocation to his team. And some guys went to a strip club that afternoon to celebrate their freedom from OTAs. And Nelson Aguilar promptly got into a dispute with one of the fine young ladies there, and I did make the news right away. And that was not at all what Chip had in mind. But anyway, that is one of the many things we're going to talk about, the OTAs. But I have a special guest today. You can't see him, so you're going to take my word for it, but you'll hear his voice. Phil Sheridan, former Eagles beat writer for the Philadelphia Inquirer, former beat writer for ESPN in the Eagles, former Inquirer columnist, and currently doing a lot of different stuff, freelance and so forth. Phil, you're here somewhere. I can't see you through the smoky haze, but I understand you're with us. Say hi.
Hello, Les, and I can see you fine. So one of us is lucky, and one of us is not so lucky.
I'm not sure which of us is more lucky.
We'll keep that vague. Keep that vague.
Yeah. So how you doing, and what are you doing these days? Tell our viewers and listeners what's going on with Phil Sheridan right now.
Yeah, well, I'm sort of vaguely retired, but not really retired. I just turned 60 last week, so I'm not like super
young man.
Yeah, I'm not super, retirement age or anything beyond retirement age. But the business kind of retired a lot of us, and I kind of got caught in that and some other stuff that happened. And so, I've been trying to do stuff. I had a Patreon column that I was doing for a while. Mm-hmm. The frustrating thing there was that as soon as I started it, I got all kinds of immediate response, and I thought, oh, this is going to go really well. And then I got to about 55 subscribers or so. Really quickly, I thought, oh, this is at this pace, but the pace, boom, ended right there, and it just never really got any bigger. And it just got to the point where I was spending a lot of time on it, and I enjoyed doing it. I enjoyed writing for people. I enjoyed people responding to it, but it just wasn't working out that well. And then I've been doing some freelance stuff. I do some freelance stuff for a business-related site, and it's a lot of stuff about personal finance, but also about military benefits and all this stuff that I know nothing about, but I have to research every single piece. And so that's interesting work in a way, because but it's not like sports writing, which is kind of obviously fun, to do and interesting on its face. It's different kind of stuff, but they actually pay, and that's a good thing. And some other stuff. I've been doing some Phillies coverage for NBC Sports Philadelphia,
Cool.
and for their website. Basically that. And got some book ideas that I've been working on, and none of them are at the point where I can talk about them in a
no music way. Writing these days, huh?
No, that's weird, isn't it? I mean, that was my side thing for forever, and that magazine basically stopped publishing. They have a website that's very active, but they don't like most websites. They're not interested in long form writing or anything. They just want quick hit stuff, and the website looks good and there's fun stuff on it, but I don't write for it anymore, really. So kind of miss that, but I'm also getting a little old to be going to shows and getting excited about some band with 10 people in the crowd, and I'm going to write about them for a magazine, that kind of thing. So.
Yeah, that's the thing. I still like to go, but my wife is very, very conscious of. She always scans the audience to make sure we're not the oldest people there. And if we are the oldest people there, that's a big, we shouldn't be here, But we tend to go to the kind of shows that we're not really the oldest people there. We saw Jason Isbell at Red Rocks. We visited our son Matt in Denver several weeks ago, and what an incredible venue that is.
I've always wanted to go there ever since that U2 video was set there years ago. Never got there, but always wanted to.
That was probably a lot of the people were your age or maybe a little bit younger. I was at the older end. There were people older than me. It wasn't Isabel's crowd isn't millennials. It's more your generation. You're the generation right after you. So I felt okay in that group, and it was a really cool time. But I wanted to ask you, one of the things I wanted to ask you right off is for people that don't really know, you've had an amazing personal journey the last, 10 years or so. If you don't mind talking about that, your health, you're okay now, which is incredible, and I'm so glad. But you've really been through the ringer. Can you bring us up to date on that?
Yeah, it is. It has been bizarre, and the preface to it is that for ever, I was always healthy. I was never sick. I never got sick. I never went to doctors. I just, you're supposed to see your doctor once a year or twice a year. I never went to the doctor, and I've been paying for that in spades ever since. It's like, okay, you go into your 50s without ever going to the doctor, and now you're going to go to the doctor every 10 minutes for the rest of your life. So it started. I guess it was 2014, right? I had taken the job at ESPN, covered that first season in 2013 for them, and that meant a lot of on-camera stuff. Or we would tape videos off our iPhones and submit them, and they go on the website. So it was a lot of visual stuff and everything. And it wasn't really what I'm cut out for mostly, but as you can see, I'm hiding my camera. That's actually an accident. But no, and in the first, at the end of that first season, I thought, all right, these are the things I got to do better next year. And then the day free agency opened in March of 2014, it was a beautiful day. It had been a miserable winter. It was a really nice day. So I'm going to go out for a run. Haven't been out for a run in a couple of months because the weather was so bad and the job was so taxing. And during the run, I had a sudden cardiac arrest, which my doctors later told me is 95% fatal. I mean, 95% of the people who have them, especially out in the wild, not in a hospital where there's people there, don't make it. And so literally I was dead laying on the sidewalk, and people stopped and saved me. I had a handful, it was about 6 people altogether, including the Langhorne Manor chief of police, 2 volunteer firefighters. I mean, I had people who knew what to do actually just come around the corner and find me laying there. So a couple of college students who were the first ones to stop, and I got the ambulance there quickly. They gave me the paddles, got me to St. Mary Hospital here in Bucks County, and within 2 weeks, I basically felt fine. It was weird. I remember my doctor saying, "Hey, your heart's in great shape," and I said, "What?" Because it's all sudden cardiac arrest is not. It's not a heart attack like a coronary where you have blocked arteries. It's the electrical components that keep your heart beating, and they go, it was kind of AFib given, which is atrial fibrillation, turning into ventricle or VFib, ventricle fibrillation, and then your heart can just stop. It happened to Damar Hamlin.
Yeah.
The Bills. It happened to him on the field. I was watching that game, and I'm like,
oh man,
that's what happened to me. He was standing there, and then he just falls. That's what happened to me.
Wow.
I still have a scar on the back of my head from where I landed. It's weird. Wow. Like the hair won't grow there. It's like I have this bald patch almost 10 years later. So that happened. And then I was still at ESPN. I had all kinds of medications I had to take. And they were making it very hard for me to do the on-camera stuff. It was just, remember the Eagles played in Arizona that year, and Rich Hoffman and his wife, Mary, who was a doctor, came on the trip, and we all had dinner together. You were probably at this dinner, and Mary Hoffman asked me about, she's a doctor. She was asking me, what happened exactly, the details, and she asked me about what medications I was on, and I named them, and she looked at me like wide-eyed and like, oh my God, and I said, what's that reaction about? She said, I don't know how you can do your job when you take a handful of downers before you go out of the house every morning. And they're all suppress heart rate, keep your heart calm and keep things settled, and very hard to they tell you if you're doing TV work or media work, be energetic.
Yes, energetic. Yeah.
And I have I'm in a coma, so it was not a good mix anyway. So after 2015 season was my third year, I was done. I was not in good shape. They made a lot of changes that year. A lot of people who were in the first wave of this ESPN NFL Nation, a bunch of people got bounced. The people who got bounced tended to be slightly older Caucasian males, just coincidentally, I think. And a lot of the hirees, the people who replaced us, were not. Although Tim McManus is in fact a Caucasian male who replaced me, but a lot of the other ones, it was a diversity thing, which is fine,
right? Although
they shouldn't have hired probably 32 white guys, right? If they wanted diversity, that was. So anyway, a couple of months after that, I started feeling really, really sick, and I didn't know what it was, and it was leukemia. AML, the not the good kind, not the kind you want to get. And so that meant 8 months of going back and forth in and out of the hospital, getting chemo, getting radiation. I had a bone marrow transplant, which is a shocking thing to do to your body.
Yeah.
And I guess that's the long version, but it's hard to do a shorter version.
Oh, it certainly is. And that's just remarkable. And it's a testament to your courage and your resilience that you're here talking with us today and sounding like yourself, and from all accounts looking like yourself, although I can't verify that as well as I would like to. But it's an incredible story. And really, I think most of us who know you admire you for everything you've gone through and the way you've come through it, and maintained your sanity and
that's
poise.
That's debatable.
And all those things. I can't even imagine what it's like.
Well, and the punchline to all that is that in 2017 was when I had the bone marrow transplant. The next year, my house burned down.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
So that wasn't health-wise a problem for me, but we did lose our pretty much everything in our house, and then spent a year living in an apartment while the house was rebuilt. So all of that kind of, it felt like somebody had a voodoo doll that looked just like me, although no one knows what that is, what that looks like, and the pins were just perfectly placed every time. They just hit right in the heart.
Incredible. Just incredible. I know we're kind of coming up on a commercial break here, but I want to give you at least, you can at least be thinking about this. I wanted to talk to you today some about how much covering the NFL has changed, how much the NFL has changed, in the time that we've both been around it. I came in after you. I started covering the Eagles in 2002, and you were, much to my chagrin, already well established as the Inquirer beat writer with really good sources. And, you certainly had the upper hand in that. But it's a very different atmosphere today, I guess. The job is different. The team is different. The way the league works is different. And I really want to get into some of that with you. And I don't think a lot of the changes are for the better. Some of them I probably are, but I do think there's a distance between, and I'm not just talking about things that affect reporters here. I'm talking about our audience as well.
Right.
Things that affect the information that you are allowed to see as a consumer of news, as someone who wants to know, what these people are like and what things on the inside are like. I don't think you're getting as good a picture of that as you did 20 years ago, probably, despite social media and all the stuff that has come around in the interim. So I do think we have that commercial coming up, and we'll be right back with more from Phil Sheridan through the murky haze of the Canadian wildfires.
Hey, Birds fans, the NFL schedule has arrived and Philly Sports Trips has all the details now. Visit the site phillysportstrips.com. This is sure to be an epic season. Be sure to go there now to make sure that you don't get shut out. Join us in Tampa, LA, Seattle, or when we get revenge in Kansas City. Don't want to fly? No problem. Gather up your crew and hop aboard one of our signature boisterous bus trips to DC or New York. Sign up now and make sure to mention A2D. Don't miss out on the best Philly fan experience anywhere. Philly Sports Trip customers always stay at the best hotels and meet NFL legends. Book today.
And
we're back with Bowen on the Birds.
I was fascinated by that ad because my younger daughter, who's now 33, she's married, husband's hardcore Eagles fan. And their thing for the last couple of years has been they love to pick a road trip and go.
Yeah.
So I have to get her and take a look at this A2D. A2D, is that right? Get their situation.
But the whole thing with fans traveling to these games, it is remarkable. The last several years I was on the beat, you'd take any flight to the city, and it didn't matter which city. It didn't have to be like, obviously everybody wants to go to New Orleans or LA or something. You could be going to Cleveland,
right?
And the plane is full of Eagles fans, and they're making, and sometimes they don't even have tickets for the game. They're just going to go there, be in the city, go to a bar and
take over. They're going to take over the bar, take over the city.
Kind of like the Taylor Swift fans who watch the concert from the parking lot, But the Eagles are a remarkable phenomenon in this city. They really are. And people do go to these games, and it's I don't know of any other situation like it in the NFL.
I've never really heard of it. I mean, when people come to Philadelphia, teams come to Philadelphia, and the media who cover them come to Philadelphia. They're your friends. You've known these people now because you cover the league, and you all hang out at the Super Bowl, and we ask. I ask, like, you just came from wherever. What happens? I mean, is the whole flight full of fans from wherever, LA, Denver, Kansas City, Minnesota, and they just go. They look at it like they've never heard of this phenomenon, and I'd be like, okay, well, it's we just call it like flight 700 or the flying 700 level, because they're usually a little tuned up. A couple drinks, couple drinks at the airport before you get on the plane, and they're having a good time. We're not always having a good time as the media guys on a work trip, but they are, and they're fun to be around.
Questions, but I don't mind that. At least people.
I love Philadelphia fans. I always have.
Right.
Even at their worst, they're the best fans, I think, in the country. So that's my opinion.
Well, our agree or disagree topic today is that the way that sports discussion has evolved into hot takes and outrage spewing really is corrupting the whole discussion. It makes things, it serves the public poorly, I guess, is my contention. And I wanted to get your thoughts on that. And it hasn't always been like that. Or maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it has, but that wasn't the way I perceived it when I first started covering this.
Yeah, I guess the thing that immediately strikes me is that, yes, I agree that this culture of, hot takes and, everybody waving their arms and yelling about stuff is childish and doesn't help anybody understand things any better. And, but the other thing about it, the flip side of it is it's immensely popular. I mean,
really
people want that. And I don't know why they want it. I mean, I would rather they wanted witty, well thought out and cleverly written copy, from somebody who actually works to learn things. I wish that was like the one that paid, but I mean, we worked in the same city for the same company overall as the legendary Stephen A. Smith, who is now the grand poobah of hot takes and outrage and all that stuff. And he makes like $7 million a year at ESPN, some number like that, which, Stephen and I became columnists on the same day in 2003, I think. And theoretically, we're paid somewhat close to the same. And I don't make $7 million a year. So I think he won that.
Yeah.
And I salute him. I've always said that. People are always like, well, do you resent that? Stephen being so successful and making so much money. I said, no, I don't resent it. I admire him. I take my hat off. I couldn't do what Stephen does in a million years. You could point the camera and, of course the camera doesn't work, but you could point the camera at me and expect me to sound off and draw an audience and stuff. And it would never happen. So
yeah,
good for him, but it's bad for everybody else, I think.
I was looking on Twitter today, and there was a thing with Stephen A. that he was questioning Joe Biden's fitness to run for a second term, and I can't process this information. How Stephen A. becomes this oracle is just beyond me. But that's the world we live in.
You've heard of Tucker Carlson, right?
Yeah.
So you can make a whole career. You can make a whole career out of just having an empty head and a big mouth. I mean, not Stephen Stephen doesn't have an empty head. Tucker Carlson has an empty head.
That's true. That's true. Tangential to that is the issue of traditional people like ourselves in the media and access. One of the things I realized when I first came on the Eagles beat, and you were doing it for the Inquirer, was that you had a good relationship with Fletcher Smith, who was Donovan McNabb's agent at the time.
Yeah.
And I eventually built a decent relationship with Fletcher Smith. It's such a different world now, Phil, 20 years later. Jalen Hurts' agent is a young woman named Nicole Lynn. Right. And she's a very good agent. She gets, she's really phenomenal and dynamic and a great story, a young Black woman who's becoming a power in the agent community. You might have noticed the Inquirer did a story about her recently, just right after Jalen's big contract came out.
Right.
And the story, which was well done, was told through the lens of a few of her clients. And there was nothing from Nicole Lynn in the story. And the reason for that is, although this was not made explicit in the story, Nicole Lynn doesn't deign to deal with local media.
Right.
She will not, the time that I was still covering the Eagles, when Jalen was on the team, she would not answer a text from me, or give me any sort of acknowledgement whatsoever, or any other local media person. And she came to the press conference where the contract was announced, and I saw, pictures of her on social media. I thought, okay, if I were there, I'm sure some of these reporters did this, I would sidle up to her afterwards and introduce myself and, try to get a word or two about Jalen and how happy she was for him, and, kind of set the groundwork for some sort of relationship. Yeah. So I asked one of the reporters about this. I texted him. He said, yeah, she said this was Jalen's day and she didn't want to, do any media
Yeah.
What a world. I mean, it's just,
Yeah.
it's so ridiculous. The Inquirer was doing essentially a puff piece. I mean, it was
Sure.
truth, but
Right.
very, very complimentary to her. And she just could not be bothered to participate in this, because all she really needs is Adam Schefter and Ian Rappaport and Tom Pelissero and a couple of other people, and she's set, and that really was not the case. If many years ago, if you had a prominent client in Philadelphia, you needed to deal with the Philadelphia media. You needed to have a relationship there, and that benefited the people in this market, who read that stuff about the Eagles, and it benefited the client. And there just doesn't seem to be any feeling of that whatsoever anymore. For me, it really started with Carson Wentz, and I have a long-winded story about that, but I'm talking too much here, so I'm going to cut that short, except to say that I couldn't even sit down with Carson Wentz one-on-one to do a story about his charity softball tournament.
Yeah, it's embarrassing and sad. And basically what happened, I left the Inquirer and went to work for ESPN. And you realize when you're working for ESPN that, it's not coincidental that a network that is paying huge money to the NFL for broadcast rights breaks news. I mean, that's the game. And it's like Adam Schefter, who was a really good reporter when he was at the Denver Post. So I'm not saying Adam isn't a good reporter or doesn't work hard. I'm sure he is a good reporter and he does work hard. But the league just hands out, they're just handing out, scoops to all these, and the agents learn that too. That, if I can get Adam and he tweets it, I don't have to answer 7 calls from 7 different reporters at newspapers. It's and then they basically all say, well, it was tweeted, so it's true. And that, it just became a whole other thing. Whereas I
would maintain that Adam Schefter certainly reports about the Eagles, but he's reporting on 32 teams.
Oh, right.
If I were an agent, I would also want to, and I had a prominent client in Philadelphia, I would also want those reporters to know, my thinking, who I am and what I'm about. That a snippet here and there from Adam Schefter isn't the same thing, but that seems to have, I don't know where that argument went, but it went away quickly.
Well, I think you kind of hinted at this a little bit too, is that, so much has changed about, we used to go into the Eagles locker room, for like an hour a day. And most of the players, like when they were back at the vet, most of the players would be in the locker room for almost the whole hour because there was nowhere else for them to go on a practice day in the middle of the week. So, and you could just walk around and I could walk up to Reggie White in the Eagles locker room and just make small talk with him. Ask him how he was doing. He would tell a funny story, or he would do his Muhammad Ali impersonation and make everybody laugh. And it's Reggie White, who's like one of the greatest players in the history of the league. And you could just walk up and say, "Hey, Reggie, what's up?" And he'd say, "Hey, how you doing?" And we would talk stuff. And, the idea of that happening now, like that you go up and talk to, pick a player, Jalen Hurts or Fletcher Smith or somebody anybody in the locker room. Fletcher Cox. I'm sorry. You said Fletcher Smith earlier in the room.
Yeah.
Fletcher Cox. I was trying to think of the Reggie.
If it's their day to talk, you're lucky.
Yeah, right. But you can't go up to them in the locker room without 8 people behind you.
Yeah, right.
7 of them have TV cameras. It's like, or microphones. I mean, yeah, it's a whole different world, and it's an easier world in some ways because everybody kind of knows, well, it's going to get tweeted by some agent. And so I don't really have to, we also worked. I mean, I don't know about you, but I would guess that like me back then, I would make, 20 phone calls and then spend the rest of the day waiting for one person to maybe call back. And, you worked at it, chipped away at it. So I don't think anybody bothers doing that much of that anymore. Maybe a handful of
it's not cost effective. You kind of get to the point where you understand, unless it's a new agent, somebody that you haven't dealt with, and you're going to try, but after you've tried Don Yee or somebody 50 times and they haven't returned anything, there's not going to be a 51st time, unless you just like wasting your effort. But we do have another video ad coming up, Phil, and I will, if you have some more time here, I'd love to talk to you more on the other side of it.
Sure.
Hey, Birds fans, the NFL schedule has arrived and Philly Sports Trips has all the details now. Visit the site phillysportstrips.com. This is sure to be an epic season. Be sure to go there now to make sure that you don't get shut out. Join us in Tampa, LA, Seattle, or when we get revenge in Kansas City. Don't want to fly? No problem. Gather up your crew and hop aboard one of our signature boisterous bus trips to DC or New York. Sign up now and make sure to mention A2D. Don't miss out on the best Philly fan experience anywhere. Philly Sports Trip customers always stay at the best hotels and meet NFL legends. Book today.
And we're back on Bowen on the Birds. Phil Sheridan is here. You'll be able to hear him in just a minute. You won't be able to see him. We're having some camera problems there. Or it could be the wildfire smoke. We're not entirely sure. But, Phil's up there. He's in Bucks County. He's much closer to the wildfires than I am in South Jersey. So that might be it. But we were talking about how writing has changed, how covering the league has changed, social media and things like that. Phil, something else I saw recently. My contention is that we know more about athletes maybe than we used to, but not in a good way. And we're not, the fan isn't as close to the athletes as he might have been or she might have been 20 years back, because there aren't the kind of long pieces done, routinely on guys. You don't go to a guy's house as much as you used to and sit with him and things like that. But we do have social media. And I don't know if you saw this yesterday, but Zion Williamson, famous NBA player, was in a social media tiff with a porn star who was quite miffed at him and intimated that she might be pregnant with his child and had a series of derogatory things to say about Zion Williamson. And I'm thinking, before social media, I could have gone on blissfully unaware of this for the rest of my life, but now I know. And it just seems very odd to me. And if you're covering the team that Zion Williamson plays on, you live in fear of something like this, because suddenly your day and your week is upended and you're trying to figure out what the hell is going on here and what the ramifications of this might be. We had a situation in Indianapolis this week where the Indianapolis writers are just sort of going about their day, and suddenly one of their players is on the verge of being suspended God knows how long for gambling. It just seems like a topsy-turvy world in terms of how quickly things escalate and the way information gets out there. And you really have to be incredibly tuned in to all this, I guess.
Yeah, well, a couple of things came to mind. And one thing was going back a little bit, but also taking into what you just said. I think that one of the reasons so many of the relationships have changed over time is just the flat out explosion and how much money these people make.
Yeah.
And Fletcher Smith with Donovan McNabb, I mean, he was making the agent's percentage, on a $10-20 million rookie contract or whatever it was at the time. I forget the numbers. And then he did a second contract with Donovan that, looked enormous, but it was a long time, and a lot of, money that was never going to be earned at the end. Right now, Nicole just did a deal for, $1 billion. And, it's just, why would she want to talk to anybody? Yeah. Why would she wait? Lee Steinberg used to talk to everybody. Yes. And he had all the biggest contracts and he had all the best quarterbacks, but each one of those contracts was a good payday. But one of these contracts is just everybody's life has changed, and it's in every sport.
Not only does the agent's life change, but obviously the player's life.
Right.
Players used to be, and I don't think this is news to anybody, 30, 40 years ago, players lived upper middle class lives, but they weren't super rich. Now players are super rich. They are just not people you're going to find walking around your neighborhood very often.
Right.
It's just when I was covering the Flyers, Phil, when I first started covering the Flyers, they were in the Spectrum, and occasionally I would go talk to fans. The Flyers were in a bad spot back then, much like they're in now. It was the early 90s. And so many of the fans were people who lived in working class South Jersey communities who remembered helping Bob Clark work on his car in the 70s. He'd be in his driveway, underneath the hood, and they'd go over. And I don't think anybody has that experience anymore.
No. That reminded me of, and remember 93, Mitch Williams throws
right
the infamous home run ball to Joe Carter. And after the game, I think it was Dave Hollins, actually. Guy almost never talked to anybody. But after the game, he said, well, Mitch has been under a lot of pressure. He's at home and people are bothering his family at the house and all this stuff because, that was wrong of people to do, I guess. But,
right.
All these guys now, they live, they own cities. They have places to go that you can't even get to, gated communities.
Right. I was going to say, good luck getting over the fence to bother somebody.
Yeah, exactly. And it's, that's fine.
Yeah.
Good for them if they can make the money, but it changes things.
It sure does.
I don't think we even know yet how much, all the ramifications of these kinds of these changes. I mean, Mike Schmidt used to make $2 million a year. Like he would be like the last guy in your bullpen at $2 million a year now.
Yes.
It's like he's the best player in Philly's history.
Well,
Trey Turner makes $30 million.
Right. I think one change that you're starting to see and you're going to see more of is players make so much money that segueing into like a coaching career is much less attractive than it was 30 or 40 years ago when you had to do something like that because you were 32 years old and you didn't have enough money to get through the next 50 years, without doing something. Yeah. But coaching is hard work, and it's even if it pays reasonably well, it's incredible grinding work. And, people talk about, well, maybe when Jason Kelce retires, he'll become like Stoutland. Why on earth would Jason Kelce do that? He'll go into media, national media, and make a lot of money is what he'll do. And he'll be kind of a cushy life. I mean, he'll work, but it won't be. He won't be watching film at 4 a.m, wondering how he's going to, block the Tampa Bay pass rush. That's I can tell you right now. It's such a different world. And it started a while back. I remember Ike Reese, who's of course now a local radio personality. He was thinking about coaching, and Ike didn't have I don't think he made 20 or 30 million or anything like that as a player, but he made money.
He did fine.
He talked to Jim Johnson about coaching, and he was interested in that. And Jim Johnson said, and Ike would have had to go in at the very low level, of coaching, like, assistant, a position coach, film cutter upper, things like that. And Jim said, no, you don't have to do that. You can go into media. You can find a lot of ways to capitalize on your career that'll be much more interesting and fulfilling and will kill you, a lot less than coaching will. And that I took that advice, and I just think that's going to be more and more the case, that you won't see prominent players stepping into, unless they can become like a head coach or at least a coordinator. I don't think you'll see guys grinding up through the coaching ranks with $50 million in the bank.
Yeah, well, it's the other thing, the people that I think of when you're talking about that, one thing is like D'Amico Ryans just got a head coaching job, right? So
Yes.
D'Amico Ryans is probably making really good money. I mean, he made good money in the NFL as a player.
Right.
Now he's a head coach. Or like going the other way with media, Troy Aikman makes many times more now every year to be on TV than he ever made as one of the highest paid players in the NFL during his entire career. I mean,
exactly
that's
right.
how much the money has just exploded. And if you're going to get $10 million a year to go to a game a week and talk about it, that you can, if you can do that, you can do that forever. I mean, the longer you do that in television work, the more they want you. It's like,
yes,
they don't want changes. They want the same person over and over again forever.
People have built an audience, and that the fans know who they are and what their persona is, I guess.
Well, it's weird because like Troy Aikman is very good at it, and Tony Romo is actually really good at it too. And for years, doing weekly conference calls with Eagles opponents, we would always get, when the Eagles were going to play the Cowboys, we'd always get Troy Aikman or any quarterback, but Troy Aikman and Tony Romo. And they were like the best guys on these conference calls because they were smart. They had thoughts about what they were saying, and they expressed those thoughts well. They had insight, and they shared it, and they were likable. And it was like, all of a sudden, Tony Romo is like the popular new hot TV analyst. And I'm like, well, yeah, because he was the guy on the phone who actually tried to answer questions and engage. And
by the way, that weekly, we're talking about changes, that weekly conference call with the quarterback, that's gone. That
is it.
Several years ago, the NFL just decided. I guess there are some media markets where there are only 2 or 3 reporters now who really cover the team, and in Philly there'd be 20 guys around the speakerphone.
The whole room would be packed.
But not the case in some cities, and they just decided they didn't have to do it anymore.
Plus, you can go on the team website and watch their press conferences live.
Yes, exactly. So, Speaking of which, I guess we should talk about the current team a little bit here. I think people are interested in that fun bunch of people who came very close to winning the Super Bowl just several months ago. We are going to have a video ad coming up soonish, but it's not here yet, so we're going to talk a little while longer. They finished OTAs today, Phil, and I've seen a real sort of circuitous course here for spring work. There was a time when, maybe it was a little bit before I was actually covering the team, I've been told by people like Reuben Frank that there was a time when not much attention was paid to spring work, and there wasn't much written or said about it. Then by the time I got into it, it was a pretty big deal, and there was a lot of it, and you came out every day for weeks and weeks. And you'd be thinking at the end of every day, okay, I'm going to write about X. I wrote about X going into the draft. Now I'm writing about it again. And then when training camp kicks off, I'll be writing about X one more time. It kind of got, it was a bit of a pain in the butt, to tell you the truth. Nick Sirianni has fixed all that. He doesn't use all of his allotted practice time in the spring. And if 10 years ago, if you'd showed me an NFL coach who didn't use all of his allotted practice time, I would have keeled over. That's heresy. But he doesn't. He doesn't do a mandatory mini camp because his veterans don't like that idea. And they don't allow reporters are out there for like 2 days total for the whole thing.
I don't mind. I wouldn't have minded that part of it because I did. Those were long days and long weeks when you had to get up every day, go down there, and very little access, watch a lot of really soft kind of drills and stuff.
Right.
We don't really learn much. But the thing that shocked me
about stuff that isn't immediate. You're writing about some 5th round draft pick that might have a chance to do X, Y, or some guy that in the off season, gained or lost 10 pounds and now he's a different person and blah, blah, blah. I never enjoyed that kind of coverage. And it exists in every sport. It's spring training stories in baseball are the same way. It's just, you're just trying to get through the exercise there.
Basically how it goes. But I was a little surprised by the lack of off-season work not because, I mean, I can't second guess Nick Sirianni because he's done a really good job. He seems like he knows what he's doing. But I mean, they have 2 new coordinators.
Yes.
I would think that with 2 new coordinators, and they went to the Super Bowl and the program's going very well, but those are big jobs. And if you're changing anything, and you're going to change things, especially on defense, we have probably a whole new system. Yeah, you might want to take advantage of that. Now, maybe they just overdid it in the past, and that was just the culture. That's possible.
I think they did, and I have a point on that, but we've got to get to our last video ad right now, and we'll prevail upon Phil's patience and come back to him afterwards, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
Hey, Birds fans, the NFL schedule has arrived and Philly Sports Trips has all the details now. Visit the site phillysportstrips.com. This is sure to be an epic season. Be sure to go there now to make sure that you don't get shut out. Join us in Tampa, LA, Seattle, or when we get revenge in Kansas City. Don't want to fly? No problem. Gather up your crew and hop aboard one of our signature boisterous bus trips to DC or New York. Sign up now and make sure to mention A2D. Don't miss out on the best Philly fan experience anywhere. Philly Sports Trip customers always stay at the best hotels and meet NFL legends. Book today.
And we're back with Bowen on the Birds, our final segment coming up here with Phil Sheridan, esteemed Philadelphia Inquirer and ESPN writer who now does financial stuff and freelance sports. A man who just had a birthday, by the way, a milestone birthday, his 60th, which makes him still 7 years younger than me. But I'm sure, he's feeling his 60 years as he sits through this show.
But the funny part of that for me is that we just talked about some of the stuff that happened to me over the last 10. All that happened in my 50s.
Yeah.
So I'm turning 60, and people are, any problem turning 60? And I'm like, I survived my 50s. I got through that. Whatever happens, it's gravy. It's I'm playing with house money, and I'm fine. So I'm not afraid of getting old. I'm just afraid of not getting old.
Yeah. Very well said. On the OTAs, I did have a point there. One point, I do think they overdid it in the past. I remember Correll Buckhalter tearing an ACL.
Yeah.
In OTAs. But I also think that the way they teach now has changed so much. And you're right about the new coordinators, especially on defense. But, the playbook is now a tablet, and you can show a guy 30 videos of a technique or a coverage that you want him to assume. And if he's any kind of, and I think they prioritize finding people who are good, quick learners, quick studies, maybe you can get that across without having him perhaps, rip up an Achilles tendon trying to do it.
That's a good point. That's a very good point. Yeah. I hadn't thought of it that way.
That's part of it. I really do. But, everybody says this is the way to go because Nick did it last year and they got to the Super Bowl and they didn't have a lot of injuries. What tends to happen if you don't have a lot of injuries one year is the next year is a disaster. And, and you'll certainly, if that happens, you'll hear people point to the lack of practice time in the spring as the reason that this happened. But I don't know. I guess we'll have to see. But several issues with the team right now that are interesting. They had some press conferences this week, and they had a couple of the running backs talk. They had Kenny Gainwell and Boston Scott. There was a lot of talk about sharing the load and how are you guys getting along. And of course, Gainwell and Scott talked. It's wonderful to have these guys in the room. It's a great room, and we can all help the team get back to the Super Bowl. But they have 4 guys that are pretty well established, plus poor Trey Sermon, whom everybody forgets about, who was, when the season ended last year and they knew they were parting with Miles Sanders, it seemed like Trey Sermon might finally, move into the top group anyhow. I don't see how in the world that happens now. They've got, let me see, I have this in my notes, and of course I'm on the wrong page. So let's see if I can get this right. They have DeAndre Swift. They have Rashaad Perry. They have Rashaad Penny, Kenny Gainwell, Boston Scott, and Trey Sermon. They have 5 running backs, all of whom, have good credentials. It's almost like they're sort of counting on a couple guys getting hurt. And there's actually fans asking about, so the Vikings cut Dalvin Cook, and people are, the Eagles going to sign Dalvin Cook. Well, where the hell would they put him? No, they're not going to sign Dalvin Cook. But what do you think of that running back room, and how do you think that might shake out, Phil?
It's a good question, and I don't know if I have an answer because we didn't used to ever see this kind of thing, Right. So, I mean, going back to the beginning of the Andy Reid era, I mean, that was really obvious. Andy, and then through Joe Banner was the one executing a lot of the stuff in terms of money and allocating money and everything. But the philosophy was, you don't overpay for running backs because they are going to get hurt. You say somebody's going to get, well, yeah, they're running backs. Probably 2 of them are going to be deal with serious injury issues over the course of the season. So, the other thing that strikes me is that I think it was hockey had the thing about if you have 2 goalies, you don't have a goalie. And I think if you have 5 running backs, you don't have a running back. Although having it now doesn't really apply as much. If that's the case in September, we're like, well, who's the running back? Then it doesn't matter that they have 5. They need 1. Right. And you need one who stays healthy. And, Sanders gave them that. But that's not valued in the way they look at the league now. I mean, Jim Brown just passed away, and it's like, I can imagine in this era, Jim Brown being like, wow, we're not, he's good and all, but he's going to break down. He's like, he's going to break down.
Or you just don't use the running back. It's the rules have changed so much to make passing ascendant that you just, if you were Jim Brown today, you wouldn't be Jim Brown. You wouldn't have that kind of impact on the game, I don't think. But I was interested they did have Kenny Gainwell talk, and I was kind of interested in that because he's been around a few years now. I never really, until this past season's playoffs, I never saw as much as some people did in him. He didn't get regular work. He was a small guy.
Right.
I wasn't that. But then in the playoffs, suddenly he was their main guy. Sanders was dinged up, and he really came on. And it was apparent from what he said in his press conference that he said, quote, "I'm expecting a high role this year." Well, they did go out and get Rashaad Penny and DeAndre Swift. So, I wonder how that's all going to work out, if Kenny is going to have a bigger role than he had last season, or if he's going to be pretty frustrated by all this. But, he did turn out to be a pretty dynamic player. He did say that he's been through this sort of thing before. When he was in college, they had Tony Pollard at Memphis, and he worked with other runners. But that's something I'm going to keep an eye on, is Kenny's what Kenny thinks about all this and how much he's getting the ball. Because part of me would like to see him get the ball after the way he did in the playoffs. I'm pretty intrigued, and I'd like to see more from him. Another thing that came up, they had the linebackers coach talk this week. There's a guy named DJ Eliot. I've never met him, but he was at Temple, and now he's with the Eagles. Yeah. And he talked about physicality a lot and tackling. And I think those are good things for a linebackers coach to talk about. He said to be a great linebacker, you have to be a great tackler. He was asked about Nakobe Dean, who is a player of great intrigue to me. Everyone assumes that Nakobe Dean is just going to step in here and be a real top of the league type starter. And he barely got on the field last year, except for special teams. I think there's a lot to still, I know what he did at Georgia, but this isn't Georgia. And, even though it looks like it sometimes in the locker room, or the SEC, which it definitely looks like in the locker room, but he's got to really work out. And Eliot said that Nakobe has been very serious about it, and that in their introductory talk, he immediately asked to see the new playbook and wanted to get, going on that. So those are good things.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
The other thing is,
he is a guy that I was totally interested in and intrigued by last year, and it would have been disappointing, except they went to the Super Bowl too. So when a guy doesn't play that much, and guys who aren't that high up in terms of value and where they were drafted or whatever are playing, you think, oh, maybe this guy's not so good. But they went to the Super Bowl, so if he gets into the rotation this year, and last year doesn't matter in terms of him.
Well, it's kind of weird because they knew all along that they probably weren't going to re-sign T.J. Edwards and Kazir White.
Right.
But they were playing well enough, and the team was so good that they couldn't really justify, knocking some of their reps down and getting Nakobe in there. But it certainly would have been better for the 2023 team,
right,
had they done that, since they knew these guys weren't coming back. It's just one of those catch-22s you get into when you're a good team, I guess. But this linebacker coach, one more quick thing. He coached Davion Taylor at Colorado, and I've almost forgotten about Davion Taylor. He was a draft pick a few years ago, a guy who hadn't played much, was a great athlete, and they really, they had sort of that you cross your fingers and hope you've hit gold kind of thing. And it looked like they hadn't hit any gold. He hasn't done much except here and there on special teams. But you got his old college coach, so who knows? Maybe there's something there still to be found. The biggest positional battle, I guess, on these Eagles is going to be right guard, Phil, where they have Cam Jurgens, the center that they drafted last year to replace Jason Kelce, who obstinately refuses to be replaced. He's battling with Tyler Steen, whom they drafted this year from Alabama, who's more of a natural guard, I think, than Cam Jurgens is. He's a bigger guy than Cam Jurgens. And I was thinking the Cam Jurgens discussion was a little tepid from Howie Roseman and Nick Sirianni earlier in the offseason. I was thinking maybe they really want Tyler Steen to come in here and win this job, that they only see Jurgens as a center. But I have to say, during the OTAs, the message has been that Cam Jurgens is killing it. And I know Lane Johnson certainly endorsed him the other day, talked about how strong he is, and, kind of put a little bit of that to rest for me. Do you have any thoughts about right guard? They're replacing a guy, Isaac Suamalo, who was kind of slow to develop, but ended up being a really good player last year.
Well, I think your team's in great shape if your biggest preseason battle is at right guard. I mean, we covered the league for many years where you might not even know who the right guard was on a team because it's just that was those guys over there. And I'm exaggerating a little bit, but not by much. But Sayamalo, as you said, I mean, early on I thought, great hair, but I'm not sure that there's a player there. And then he goes and gets tons of money, and I think Jeff Stoutland should be an agent for these guys or get some kind of fee, because that's obviously the heart and soul of this whole thing operation is Stout, and he's super great guy and also really smart, and he gets it done. I mean, I think Lane Johnson's probably a Hall of Fame type guy at this point.
Yeah. And
if he's comfortable playing next to either one of these guys, and Cam Jurgens, he's had a little more opportunity to be around. If he says it's okay, it's okay. It's going to be okay, because first off, whoever it is going to be playing next to Lane Johnson. So, and between Jason Kelce and Lane Johnson, so you could probably put you or me in there and get by.
Yes.
So for that to be a question mark, I think it's one that will easily be resolved, because I think probably either one of those guys will be fine, because they're not going to be, now when you're working in a new tackle, somebody who's out at the edge and maybe a little more open to being exposed, that's a little bit trickier and a little more risky. So I think with guard, it's if it doesn't turn out great, you can get by, and if it does turn out really good, and with this level of talent, draft picks, and with Stoutland coaching them, I think you got a chance of turning out really, really well. And then you're home free. So I don't know which one, because I haven't seen any of this stuff in person, but I would imagine they're going to be okay.
That's one more thing I wanted to bring up before we end the show, Phil, is that, I retired from beat writing 2 years ago, and you've been away from the NovaCare a little bit longer than that. It still seems odd to me to be on the fringes and not in the middle of stuff, and it's not the kind of job where you can just wander down there and say hello to people and, shake Brandon Graham's hand. And, they don't let you do that unless you're part of a credentialed entity. You're not welcome. And it's just I have a little bit of a hangover, withdrawal symptom kind of thing. I'll admit it. Not as bad as it was. It gets a little easier as time goes by, but I still, I look at stories and think, oh, I would have liked to have done that story. Do you get that too?
Yeah, I think less and less as time has gone by. Well, actually, like right at the beginning, I mean, like the first year I wasn't around them at all. They went to the Super Bowl and won it. Like I had been covering the team basically for 30 plus years.
Yeah.
Pretty much every year, pretty much every game for 30 years. And went to a Super Bowl after 2004 season. But the idea of winning one, it just seemed like a thing that wasn't ever going to happen. So yeah, that was weird. But for me, the upside of that was, I would have been there. I would have been working. I would have been working my butt off like we do and covering something like that. Instead, I was with my family. We went to a big Super Bowl party, and I was with my daughters and my wife and stepsons, and we just had a wonderful time. And my dad had passed a few months earlier, so I was just watching it like for him. I was like talking to my dad as it was happening. And it was like, yeah, Dad, you're not going to believe what Nick Foles just did. So I just I tried to just take it in stride. I mean, one thing I like, if I never see the inside of an airplane again, I'm really okay with it.
Right.
I like this place is like when the team's somewhere that I liked going to, then there's a pang. But it's mostly for the city that I'm not going to. It's not for the games. I can watch the game on TV and it's about the same. So
I miss seeing people in press boxes that I'm used to seeing. The last time last time I was at an Eagles 49ers game, in fact, Ann Killian asked me about you. That just flashed into my mind there. People like that, that you just don't have any. How are you ever going to see these people? I mean, they're not like real close friends where you're going to go travel and visit them, but people that you're used to seeing for years and years and years, and you just don't have that connection anymore. It's odd. It really is.
It really is odd. And one of the odd things over the last few years, we've had a lot of people that I knew and you knew, and for a long, long time, just, die pretty young often. And often find out about it like on Twitter. I open my Twitter feed and I see that Don Banks has passed away.
Yes.
Or, some of the people that have Jerry Fraley in Texas, who I was really good friends with, who was covered Cowboys and was a baseball guy too. And so, I mean, sooner or later, there's just not going to be none of those people are, it's going to be all, 25-year-old kids with, high hopes and ambitions. And
a lot of the people that we were used to seeing just aren't there to be seen anymore. They've either retired or they're no longer with us. That's very, very true. Well, that's pretty much it for me today, Phil. I thank you so much for hanging in through all of this, through the smoke and haze. And I'd say it's great to see you again, but I didn't. But I did hear you, and that was wonderful. And I'm really grateful that you agreed to do this, even though I initially told you the wrong day. You adjusted, and I'm so glad that you saved my butt there. Because me talking by myself for an hour, that wouldn't be any fun for anybody.
Well, I thought about doing a podcast or that kind of thing, and I try to imagine doing it. And when I have appeared on other people's, I look at it, I think, I don't know if I could do what Les is doing right now. I don't know.
Yeah, you certainly could, but you got to have the guest. I mean, last week I had Rhea Hughes for half an hour because she could only do half an hour. And the second half an hour was not pretty. You run out of stuff when you're just talking to yourself. You run out of stuff very, very, very quickly.
Yeah, see, you're sad if the camera breaks because Ray's on. When Ray's on, when the camera breaks and I'm on, it's it's a win-win situation for you.
Indeed,
Yeah,
not at all. But that is it for the 4th edition of Bowen on the Birds. Until next week, everybody out there, take Nick Sirianni's advice, stay in really good shape, and don't go to jail or do anything that puts you in the news in a bad way before next Thursday. Thanks again to Phil Sheridan, and we'll see